Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into what is honestly one of the most profound transformations in human history, the television and mass media era. We're going to explore how a quirky, mechanical experiment from the late 19th century morphed into this absolute architectural pillar of modern power, literally rewiring human society along the way. It's an incredible journey, so let's get right into it.
Now, think about this for a second. By the early 20th century, the telegraph and the telephone had already conquered incredible distances, right? We had totally mastered the art of speaking across vast stretches of space. But that next big, ambitious frontier posed a massive technological hurdle. How on earth could we actually see across it?
Which brings us to Section 1, Inventing Distant Sight. The sheer mechanical ingenuity it took to make visual broadcasting a reality really didn't just happen overnight, but once it started, it moved incredibly fast. Way back in 1884, a German inventor named Paul Nipkow proposed his scanning desk. Then, by the 1920s, John Logie Baird is actually using these mechanical systems to transmit rudimentary grayscale images. From there, it exploded. In 1936, the BBC kicked off its regular public service broadcasting in London, and then, by the 1950s, the NTSC standard in the United States brought us full-color broadcasting. In just a few short decades, we leaped from spinning mechanical discs to the total externalization of human perception, right there in living color.
But here's the thing. Television wasn't just some single isolated light bulb moment. To actually make distant sight possible, humanity needed this brilliant convergence of four completely distinct scientific disciplines. We're talking electromagnetism, optics, mechanics, and the brand new cutting-edge field of electronics. All of these had to mature and seamlessly mesh together.
And it really all started with the Nipkow principle in 1884. Nipkow had this massive realization. You just couldn't send a whole picture all at once. You had to break it down. You had to decompose the image into discrete, tiny little elements. So his spinning disk used this spiral pattern of holes to essentially scan an image line by line, transmitting those elements sequentially by converting the light intensity into electrical signals. Now sure, mechanical instability definitely held it back at the time, but this core concept, systematic scanning, that became the absolute foundation for literally all television technology that followed.
Of course, to achieve the high-definition images we are so used to today, a massive pivot was necessary. Those early mechanical setups championed by Baird gave us cool grayscale images, but they were severely limited by physical moving parts. The real game changer was electronic television. Innovators like Philo Farnsworth and Vladimir Zworykin shifted over to cathode ray tubes. They developed these incredible camera tubes like the image dissector and the iconoscope. So instead of clunky moving parts, they used high-speed electron beams to scan a phosphorescent screen. And wow, this shift to electronics just dramatically improved resolution and reliability.
But honestly, the most surprising part of all this tech is that it relies heavily on a fundamental biological hack. It's called the persistence of vision. Basically, because the human eye retains images for just a tiny fraction of a second, flashing a rapid succession of scanned frames completely tricks our brains into perceiving continuous, seamless motion. So yeah, television is literally built around a quirky loophole in human biology. Pretty amazing, right?
All right, let's move into Section 2, Orchestrating Public Belief.
So, as we look at how media consumes us, there is a stark contrast to point out. Think about print media. It requires active, highly focused engagement from the reader. You have to sit down and do the work. Broadcast media, on the other hand, it delivers content in a way that is immediate and purely sensory. It grabs your eyes and ears simultaneously, and often, millions of people are experiencing the exact same thing at the exact same second. This kind of incredible synchronicity fosters a really deep sense of collective participation, and that makes broadcasting a uniquely powerful tool for shaping collective consciousness.
Naturally, governments across the entire ideological spectrum quickly realized that if you can organize communication, you can organize belief. During World War I, the Committee on Public Information stepped in to coordinate messaging and maintain morale. Later on, totalitarian regimes like Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union invested heavily in broadcast infrastructure, completely institutionalizing propaganda. They clearly understood a very modern equation. Technological reach translates directly into psychological influence.
And this influence extended deep into democratic politics, too. The 1960 U.S. presidential debates between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon perfectly captured this major shift. It proved without a doubt that in the television era, a politician's visual demeanor, their appearance, and how they handled themselves on screen mattered just as much as the actual substance of their policy arguments. It fundamentally changed how we evaluate our leaders.
Culturally speaking, this shared media truly integrated us. The 1960s brought us communication satellites, which enabled live international broadcasts and created what we called the global village. Suddenly, societies on opposite sides of the planet could sit together, staring at a screen, to witness historic events simultaneously. Think about the 1969 Apollo 11 moon landing. It was a shared, real-time experience that literally united the globe.
This brings to mind the famous media theorist Marshall McLuhan, who coined the phrase, "The medium is the message." It's an iconic quote, and for good reason. What McLuhan was getting at is that the very structure of television technology fundamentally shaped how humanity perceived reality itself. The simple fact that the medium was simultaneous, sensory, and highly visual ended up changing our culture far more than any individual TV show playing on the screen ever could.
This leads us to Section 3, the architecture of influence.
When you really dig into it, the technical design of broadcasting created massive structural asymmetries of power. It was entirely built on a one-to-many model. Just one centralized producer could simultaneously broadcast to an audience of millions of passive consumers. So media wasn't just a basic set of tools anymore. It had become an infrastructural system of power. It allowed a tiny number of authorities to shape political legitimacy and economic behavior on a scale that was previously unimaginable.
Because broadcast frequencies are finite public resources, they definitely required coordination. But different nations took vastly different approaches to this. Take the United Kingdom, for example. This limitation led to the BBC, which was structured under a public charter, state-regulated and driven by the metric of public service. But in the United States, the model was dominated by commercial networks like NBC and CBS. They were funded by advertising and driven entirely by Nielsen ratings.
And that U.S. commercial model brings up something that's actually deeply personal. Under a system driven by advertising and Nielsen ratings, the audience's attention was literally transformed into a commodity. That's right, your attention, your actual time sitting in front of that screen, became the real product being packaged up and sold to advertisers. This system effectively turned our shared culture into measurable market data.
Meanwhile, on the global stage, media became the ultimate Cold War battleground. On one side of the fence, you had international services like Voice of America and Radio Moscow transmitting ideological narratives straight across borders. On the other side, you had governments actively attempting to jam those foreign signals just to control their own information environment. Looking back, this era really highlighted the fragility of truth in a mass society, showing us just how easily spectacle and repetition could substitute for actual verified facts.
Ultimately, the centralized architecture of this media power quite literally built modern societies, creating what sociologists call imagined communities. Think about it. Millions of people who would absolutely never physically meet in real life suddenly felt a deep kinship and a shared identity. And why? Simply because they were consuming the exact same broadcasted realities at the exact same time. We were all bound together by the glow of the television screen.
But as we know, no era lasts forever. Eventually, the technological ground shifted beneath our feet yet again. The heavy, highly centralized power of the television era, which was built on those old vacuum tubes and massive broadcasting towers, gave way to semiconductors and digital encoding. And that sparked the shift toward the decentralized, highly interactive networks of the digital age. In a way, television fundamentally prepared society for a world of continuous media access, setting the perfect stage for the communication age that we're living in right now.
Which leaves us right here. Television showed us exactly how a centralized one-to-many model could organize belief, construct imagined communities, and drastically expose the fragility of truth. So now that we are completely immersed in the internet's decentralized network, I want you to think about this. Has that fragility of truth gotten better, or has it actually gotten worse? How does the history of the screen you use to watch television shape the reality of the screen you're looking at right now? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and I really hope this leaves you with plenty to think about.